the 10th African Women Writers Symposium, recently held in Johannesburg, underscored the powerful role of African women's voices in shaping narratives and challenging entrenched stereotypes in literature. Now, despite progress, the journey toward true equality and representation remains ongoing, with literature acting as both a reflection of societal values and a force for change. Now, this year's symposium brought together writers, activists, and thought leaders to explore the unique challenges faced by women in literature and to celebrate their invaluable contributions. Now, to delve deeper, we're now joined by Roshnie Moonsammy, who's producer and curator for the symposium. Thank you so much for your time. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
All right, first I'm going to ask for your reflections from this year's symposium and how did it go just for you?
The symposium went very well, but you know, with every symposium, it just means that there's a lot more work to be done. A lot more work in terms of schools, reading, literacy, as well as publishing, distribution of books, women's literature. And these are issues that we all need to be mindful of. Where do you place women's literature? If it's written by a woman, do you put it under female, women's literature? Or if it's a thriller and it's written by a woman, should it be placed in the thriller section? Because you're denying this woman author a wider audience. So these are all issues that we need to look at, in terms of going forward. And some of the salient points about promoting women's literature, enabling women's literature, and it's across the board in terms of publishing, books, schooling, university courses, and various aspects of it.
And Roshnie, I want us to now delve into some of the, themes, key themes, as well as discussions from this year's event. Talk to us about those.
Yeah, the key themes were also on self-publishing, on women's, is women's literature being taken seriously? And there were very, very important points that came out about it. In terms of what do we do as a woman's, in terms of women literature, we find that, 80% of content for TV and so on and films are from people's books, but people seem to forget that, and they are key writers. And also in terms of issues, with interesting content, like if a man wrote a certain book, whether it's on family or The Promise, it's a fantastic book. But if it was written by a woman, maybe a black woman, would it be given the same recognition? So these are really serious issues that we need to look at. And also looking at, the issue on narrating Palestine. How do the media portray Palestine? Sometimes the media says some of the voices from Al Jazeera or so on are too close to the ground. But then what is too close to the ground? South Africa in its submission in terms of what is happening now in Gaza looked at the online content of the IDF soldiers. That's close to the ground. So those are issues, how do we, as the media, regard and disregard sources of our information? Also on issues of belonging and home. I think that's very important, especially for South Africa, looking at our borders. We had important people like Frank Mankey, Sylvia Vollenhoven, Lerato Trock, looking at indigenous languages. And also issues of, for instance, Bessie Head. Botswana people claim her. She was born in Pietermaritzburg, of home and belonging and how those issues move. So these are important issues even in analyzing literature and politics, and also the quest for social justice and gender equality.
And I tell you what, this is also inspiring, especially when I hear you also talk about how indigenous languages are also being empowered as well. I want to hear just how far you think we've come and where are we right now in terms of representation, because it's a good news story that we tell that women are now being empowered in this space. However, sometimes I get a feeling that these are the conversations that are play and paused around Women's Month and then we leave them out to the next year again. How far have we come as a country, and what are some of the pressing barriers that are faced by women writers till this day?
It's interesting you asked this, because people even asked, why do you even have a title on your symposium, Taking Women's Literature Seriously? Isn't it obvious? But the obvious is not so obvious in realistic terms, So we've come a long way, but there's so much more to be done. We also had a session on hip hop and writing and women, and we had writers like Gigi Lamayne, Eavesdrop, Tony Blackman, who's a hip hop poet from New York, and just looking at the struggles women face. Even though they're writing, there are women writers who are writing amapiano. They are from the hip hop era, writing for what is happening now. What is the recognition? What is their rights? So these are important issues, both on songwriting, on literature, and as I said, we've come a long way, but there's a lot more to be done in the schools, education about your legal rights, your, ensuring your property rights, your intellectual property rights. These are major issues that we need to look at. And also we're looking at it, we were living in a time where books, it's very expensive to publish books. They're not as accessible. What are we doing? Because they're important avenues, whether it's digital, whether it's the actual physical book. How do we access? How do we make sure kids are reading people, even the content, whether it's TikTok or whatever? It comes from somewhere. Somebody has written it up. And we really need to focus on really enabling an environment for writers, be they poets, writers, script writers.
All right, Roshnie, Moonsammy, and talking to us all things the 10th African Women Writers Symposium. Thank you so much for your time on the program today.
Thank you for having me.